We are in Numbers chapter 16 today. So we finished at Numbers 15 on Thursday. And we've been considering this arc of the text where Israel has been engaging in a lot of rebellion and disobedience. Maybe I forgot to turn it on the inside. No, it says it should be on.
It is on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's definitely there. So I was getting signals. So Israel has been engaged in several acts of rebellion. Excuse me. So we went over this arc of the story. We see Miriam and her rebellion against Moses. We see the grumbling in the wilderness where they're sick of eating manna and they want to go back to Egypt, where they had things so good. We see the rebellion of the spies and the people who follow after them. So the spies bring a bad report. The people buy into that report and refuse to enter into the promised land. We see this Sabbath breaker who is stoned to death. And of course, today, all of this is going to reach a fever pitch with Korah. And you'll see what I mean by that. This is the largest rebellion that we're going to see. It, obviously, the whole congregation rebels here, but it's not like a violent uprising where they're trying to put Moses out of place. Here, Korah gets a big band of men, and he is trying to essentially usurp Moses' place and to usurp Aaron's place. So it's a huge rebellion, and the consequences for that rebellion are absolutely terrifying. In the midst of all of that, we have this set of commands that we just read about in Numbers 15. Where essentially the Lord envisions a faithful Israel, or a situation where the Lord continues to keep His promises, but Israel also starts living up to their end of the covenant. So He envisions this next generation going into the promised land and giving sacrifices of thanksgiving, pleasing aromas to the Lord. And even whenever they do sin, it's not going to be something high-handed, something intentional, and that's going to be dealt with sacrifice as well. They're going to bring their sacrifices, and they're going to be forgiven of their sins. But by the end of that bit of text, we see that there is, we can't really call it another commandment. It's a warning about high-handed sin. And there's no commandment there because there is no commandment for high-handed sin because there's no sacrifice for high-handed sin. All right, what's the consequence in Numbers chapter 15 for committing a high-handed sin against the Lord? Yeah, they're to be cut off. Now, we need to remember that this is something that the Lord has threatened just immediately before Korah's rebellion. That if you go to verse 31, we'll go to Numbers 15, verse 30. But the person who does anything with a high hand, whether he is a native or a sojourner, reviles the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from among his people. Because he has despised the word of the Lord and has broken His commandment, that person shall be utterly cut off. His iniquity shall be on him. In the context of the law, to be cut off means a number of things. All right, we've seen, like in Miriam's case, that she is cut off for a week. She goes outside of the camp for that 7-day period while she has leprosy. But we also talk about an Israelite understanding of death and of being cut off that has to do with inheritance in the land. And I want to bring this to mind now because of what's going to happen with Korah in Numbers 16. Let's jump ahead to Numbers chapter 27. We're not going to spend long there. It's just a really clear example in the book of Numbers of Israel's association of being cut off with losing your inheritance. Right? So for them, it's not just dying or being punished individually. It's that you are removed from essentially from the role of Israel. Right, and you lose your inheritance. You have no descendants to leave an inheritance to. All right, so Numbers 27, verse 1. Then drew near the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, from the clans of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. The names of his daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest, and before the chiefs and all the congregation at the entrance of the tent of meeting, saying, Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among the company of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but died for his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers. All right, so we see that when these 5 daughters come to Moses, we see the dilemma that they're in. They are coming on behalf of their father, who has died. And it's funny here, they make mention of Korah's rebellion here. They want to make it known that their father was not part of that. Right? His death is not connected to that. They say he died for his own sin. All right, but what's the problem? So what problem do they bring before Moses? He had no son, which means what? I mean, what's the significance of that? Yeah, he has no heir. Yeah, nobody to inherit the land. And look at what they say the consequence of that is. If there's nobody to inherit their father's land, they say in verse 4, Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan? Because he had no son. All right, in other words, he's not going to have any kind of posterity. All right, the daughters of Zelophehad come up again in Numbers. In Numbers 36, for example, let's see. I just want us to get a full sense of how Israel looked at this issue. This is going to have bearing on the way that we deal with Korah. Numbers chapter 36, we'll start in verse 1. The heads of the fathers' houses of the clan of the people of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, from the clans of the people of Joseph, came near and spoke before Moses and before the chiefs, the heads of the fathers' houses of the people of Israel. All right, so already we can see we're talking about the same clan that Zelophehad is from. And they said, The Lord commanded my Lord to give the land for inheritance by lot to the people of Israel. And my Lord was commanded by the Lord to give the inheritance of Zelophehad, our brother, to his daughters. All right, so that's what gets dealt with in Numbers 27. But if they are married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the people of Israel, then their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our fathers and added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So it will be taken away from the lot of our inheritance. And when the Jubilee of the people of Israel comes, then their inheritance will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. And their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers. All right, so the solution that is arrived at in Numbers 27, that the daughters of Zelophehad will be allowed to inherit their father's land, it suggests another problem. All right, and what's the problem here in the passage that we've just read? Yes. So if they marry into another tribe, the land is going to belong to that other tribe. All right. The way that this land promise works is that each tribe is going to get their allotment, and each clan within each tribe is going to get, their allotment within that larger tribal allotment. And that inheritance, how long is that inheritance to be held by that clan? Forever. It is not to leave that clan. And in fact, the law provides for circumstances where the land does leave the clan. Right? We call it the year of Jubilee. Right? If somebody gets poor and they have to sell their land, and they sell it off to another clan, it doesn't stay that way forever. Right? Every 50th year, the Jubilee is proclaimed, and that land returns back to its clan. Right? This is like an essential feature of Israelite living in the Promised Land, is that their clan, their tribal allotment, or their clan allotment, rather, the land that they live on, has always belonged to their fathers, and will always belong to their fathers. And their life in the land consists of having heirs that they can pass that inheritance on to. So whenever they talk about having an inheritance in Israel, they're literally talking about having an inheritance they can pass on. And it's this land. And anything that threatens that, their ability to hold on to that land as a clan and pass it down generation to generation, it's a problem. All right, and so we see them dealing with these problems all through the law. And whenever the law talks about being cut off, or like the daughters of Zelophehad, they ask, why should our father's name be taken away? In other words, why should he be cut off? This is one of the things that they're referring to, is that they are, again, the sinner not only dies, not only is he excommunicated, but his inheritance is no more. It doesn't lay out here in Numbers 15 what is to happen to his inheritance, like who it's to go to or what happens. But notice the way that the Lord phrases this in Numbers chapter 15, verse 31. Because he has despised the word of the Lord and has broken his commandment, that person shall be utterly cut off. His iniquity shall be on him. In other words, this is not some temporary thing that we're talking about in Numbers 15:31. This is permanent. And remember, when Israel thinks permanent, it's not just me. If it's permanent, it's me and any descendants that I might have had. Completely cut off. Wayne?
Kind of analogous way, could we possibly think of this as like the United States being like Israel, and then they're divided up into tribes or states.
Mm-hmm.
And those states are then divided up into clans or counties.
Yeah.
So there's the whole nation, and there's the states, and then there's the counties.
I mean, to kind of wrap your head around it, it might be useful to think of it in those terms. Like, imagine that each county belongs to a family. And if things go wrong, then yeah, you could have arrangements going so that some counties end up going to other states, and now all of a sudden what should be Florida is now part of Alabama, or what should be Illinois is now part of Missouri. But for them, again, we can't let this spiritual element of it pass us by. Right? Israel didn't have a full understanding of eternity. Right? They didn't have a full understanding of heaven and hell like we receive in the New Testament. Right? For them, God's pleasure or displeasure was a matter of how long they lived and whether they were able to pass their inheritance on. Right? If they died young, they angered God. Right? If they don't have any heirs, they angered God. right? Or if they live long, if they have lots of sons they can pass their inheritance on to, that's the sign of God's pleasure with them. Right? It's why you have situations like Job, right, where Job is suffering and all of his sons die. And so, of course, what do his three friends assume? Look, you've made God angry, right? All right, so with that understanding in mind, we're going to go to Numbers chapter 16 and consider Korah's rebellion. We're going to see what happens to Korah. But before we do that, let's pray together. Righteous Heavenly Father, thank you for the great gifts that you have given us today. Thank you for our time together to study from your word. And Father, I pray that you guide us, that we may study faithfully, and that we may understand, Father, the things that you have recorded for us and for your people forever. Thank you for the great gifts that you have given us in your Son, and most of all, Father, for the forgiveness that we have in him, for we are all guilty of sin, and you have shown us mercy through him. It's in his name that we pray. Amen. All right, now one way of looking at Korah is to consider him maybe in contrast to some of the earlier stories. All right, we talked about Miriam. Right, the story of Miriam is ultimately a story of God's mercy. Right, in what way? Yeah, he doesn't just flat out kill her. Right, he strikes her with leprosy, but he allows her to recover. And he allows her to rejoin the camp. So even though it's a story of punishment, it is ultimately a story of God's mercy. All right, as we read Numbers chapter 16, we're going to see whether there is any mercy here in this story. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohat, son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men. And they rose up before Moses with a number of the people of Israel, 250 chiefs of the congregation, chosen from the assembly, well-known men. They assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said to them, "You have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" All right, so what are Korah and his cronies looking for? What's their complaint? Yeah, they want power, specifically whose power? Moses and Aaron. Right? He comes before both of them. They assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. And so these guys aren't just looking for leadership over the congregation, they're also looking, and we'll see this later in the chapter, God says this, what they're looking for is a place in the priesthood. All right, now, who is the priesthood exclusively reserved for? Yeah, Aaron and his sons. Aaron and his sons, they're the only ones that can be priests. I want you to look at the list of people that we have here in verse 1 and see if you notice anything just eminently disqualifying about these guys being priests. All right, now first off, you've got Korah, son of Izhar, son of Kohat, son of Levi. He is at least of the right tribe, but not of the right clan. Right? He's not one of the sons of Aaron. He's a Kohathite. He's got his own job at the tabernacle. All right, we looked over the roles of the clans of the Levites. But then look at the other guys. Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth. And where do they come from? Reuben. Do they have any business pretending to be priests? None whatsoever. All right, so we can already see just right out of the gate, the absurdity and the seriousness of this. It's not just a Levite saying, "Hey, why can't we be priests?" That kind of sort of makes sense because they're so close to it and they minister at the tabernacle anyway. You can imagine a Levite maybe getting a little too big for his britches and thinking, why can't I do this priest thing? You look at these guys. I've watched them do this every day. I could do that. Right? But from the sons of Reuben, it's complete nonsense. Right? Because they have no place in the service of the tabernacle. No place at all. And so they bring themselves against Moses and Aaron. Let's go to verse 4. When Moses heard it, he fell on his face. And he said to Korah and all his company, "In the morning the Lord will show who is his, and who is holy, and will bring him near to him. The one whom he chooses he will bring near to him. Do this. Take censers, Korah and all his company. Put fire in them, and put incense on them before the Lord tomorrow. And the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the holy one. You have gone too far, sons of Levi." Something interesting here. If you go back to the Sabbath breaker, all right, they find this guy out picking up sticks on the Sabbath. They bring him to Moses and Aaron, and we know ultimately that this judgment is rendered that he should be put to death. Now, who gives that judgment in Numbers 15? Let's go back. Let's see. We'll go to verse 32, 15:32. While the people of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. Now look in verse 34. They put him in custody because it had not been made clear what should be done to him. So in other words, what's Moses waiting for before he takes action on this guy? Yeah, he's waiting for the word of the Lord. All right, and you get that immediately in verse 35. The Lord said to Moses, "The man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp." All right, and that's what the congregation does. Is there anything that you find absent from the account of Korah in chapter 16? Yeah, it's an odd little detail that's, well, we would expect it to be there, but it's not there. Now, this is not something that the Lord never comes to Moses and say, "Hey, you've stepped out of line." But the way the text presents it, Moses is offering this judgment himself. And notice what Moses picks. Again, we've not heard the word of the Lord in this yet, in Numbers 16. What Moses picks in verse 6 is, "Do this, take censers." All right, now, just right there, alarm bells should be ringing in our heads. Because how dangerous is that phrase, take censers? I mean, when Nadab and Abihu, all right, and those guys we're talking about Moses' nephews. All right, those guys were sons of Aaron. They had business being in the holy place and handling the altar of incense and handling the censers. They were struck down because they offered unauthorized fire from the altar of incense on their censers. Now Moses, and of course, Moses knows all of this. It's not like he's forgotten. It's his own nephews consumed by the fire of the Lord. And Moses tells Korah and his cronies, take censers. In other words, what do you think Moses has in mind? We know where this story is going. Moses knows where this is going. Take censers, Korah and all his company. Put fire in them and put incense on them before the Lord tomorrow. And the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. And Moses said to Korah, Hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it too small a thing for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do service in the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them, and that he has brought you near him, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you? Would you seek the priesthood also? Therefore it is against the Lord that you and all your company have gathered together. What is Aaron that you grumble against him? All right, there's that operative word again, grumble. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and they said, We will not come up. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you must also make yourself a prince over us? All right, by the way, just notice how silly this is. Look at what they're blaming Moses for. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey? Now, what are they talking about? I mean, they could be talking about a couple of things, both of which are really, really silly. They could be blaming Moses for the rebellion at the border of the Promised Land, the rebellion at Kadesh. That the congregation of Israel, these guys among them, chose not to go up into the Promised Land. And because of that, the Lord dooms them to wander in the wilderness until they're all dead. It looks like, might be pinning that on Moses. It's Moses' fault that we didn't go in. Or it might be, and this would be even more absurd, we've heard this kind of complaint out of Israel before, but it's always in terms of, why did you bring us up out of Egypt for us to die in this wilderness? And with that in mind, it may be, and they're not particularly clear here. Whenever they say, you brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey, they might be talking about Egypt. Which again is just about the most ridiculous thing that we have heard in the book of Numbers so far. What has so far been a book full of ridiculous things. Moreover, verse 14, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. All right, notice that issue is coming up here as well. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. And Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, do not disrespect their offering. Do not respect their offering. The big difference there. I have not taken one donkey from them, and I have not harmed one of them. And Moses said to Korah, be present, you and all your company before the Lord, you and they and Aaron tomorrow. And let every one of you take his censer and put incense on it. And every one of you bring before the Lord his censer, 250 censers. You also and Aaron, each his censer. So every man took his censer and put fire in them and laid incense on them and stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron. Then Korah assembled all the congregation against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. And the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. And they fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and will you be angry with all the congregation? And the Lord spoke with Moses, saying, say to the congregation, get away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Then Moses arose and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, depart, please, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be swept away with all their sins. So they got away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents, together with their wives, their sons, and their little ones. And Moses said, hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and that it has not been of my own accord. If these men die as all men die, or if they are visited by the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord. Right, and so here we have it laid out for us, maybe why we didn't hear Moses talking with the Lord at the beginning of the chapter. Because here he's setting this up as a condition of belief. Right, this is going to be a test. You see whom the Lord has chosen. If he's chosen these guys, they're going to be fine. They'll die of natural causes. But if the Lord has chosen me, Moses says, then he's going to do something special. If the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord. And as soon as he had finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up." And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. So this is a quick and complete judgment against Korah and against his rebellion. And notice just what a horror story this is. This is one of the weirdest episodes in the Bible, because they are taken down alive into Sheol, that is, taken down alive into the grave. It's an oxymoron, right? They're taken alive into the place of the dead. What's that make them? Well, I mean, the text does clarify for us they perish in the midst of that, right? But it looks like a really weird state to be in, alive in the place of the dead. It's a horror story, right? This is something that gets picked up in all kinds of stories through all history. I mean, if you ever had to read the Aeneid, like in high school, Virgil's epic, and the main character Aeneas has to go into the underworld and manage his way through that, and barely comes out alive. Or if you ever had to read Dante's Divine Comedy, like the Inferno, when you were in school, same premise. At the very beginning of the story, Dante is lost in a forest. He's being chased by these beasts that are seeking to kill him, and they corner him in front of this door. And so his options are, be killed by these animals or go through the door. Except the door has a sign posted over it, "Despair all who enter here." Because the door is a door to hell. And he goes in. And the whole story is about Virgil, the Roman poet, guiding Dante, who is alive, through the place of the dead. Right? And it's the sort of thing that gets picked up in all kinds of modern horror films as well. This premise of you being alive in the place of the dead. Except what Numbers demonstrates here for us is that whenever you're listening to one of those stories, whenever you're watching that kind of a horror movie where somebody goes alive into the place of the dead, that premise is not so far-fetched because God has actually done it in reality to these men. Again, it's an absolute horror show that we're watching here. Now, let us consider the extent of the Lord's judgment here before we move on in the text. We've spent time talking about what it means to be cut off. Right? And this is part of Dathan and Abiram's complaint as well. You have not given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Right, they hold this whole thing in contempt. But the Lord has threatened that anybody who commits a high-handed sin shall be utterly cut off. Do we see that happening to Korah and the rebels with him? It certainly looks that way here in our text. All right, you go to verse 27. So they got away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan and Abiram, and Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents together with their wives, their sons, and their little ones. All right, now we understand why they are in view. Right, the wives, the sons, the little ones. The sons are the ones that are going to inherit from them. And Moses said, "Hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do this." Right, that the ground's going to swallow them up, take them alive to Sheol. Go down to verse 32. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. All right, so it seems here in Numbers chapter 16 that we are seeing a fulfillment, a complete fulfillment of what the Lord threatens in chapter 15. Anybody who commits a high-handed sin shall be utterly cut off. Now, I want us to consider something. What if I told you that this is actually a story about the Lord's mercy? On the face of it, it certainly doesn't look that way. But this is a story about the Lord's mercy. There's a part of it, I mean, we can just, I guess, accept at face value. For example, going back to verse 21, the Lord tells Moses and Aaron, "Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." They fell on their faces and said, "O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and will you be angry with all the congregation?" All right, so we can see there the Lord's mercy on the whole congregation of Israel. But what if I told you this is also a story of mercy that the Lord shows to Korah? I want us to consider this. If we consider these as, again, of a piece with the other rebellions that we've seen, we've pointed this out with Miriam before, right? That Miriam is a story of mercy because the Lord punishes her, but he does not cut her off utterly, right? She's able to come back into the camp. Consider Israel's rebellion at Kadesh. The spies come back, they bring the bad report, they refuse to go up into the land, and the judgment of the Lord is that they shall wander in the wilderness until they die. Now, let's take this standard from Numbers 15, that somebody who commits a high-handed sin shall be cut off utterly. Did the Lord cut Israel off utterly for their sin at Kadesh? No? Okay, so what mercy did he show them? Okay, so they get to live while they're wandering in the wilderness, but ultimately they're going to die, though. There we go. And that's the important piece, is that their children live, and their children will inherit in the land. And so the Lord, even though with that generation, he has judged that generation, and they're all going to die outside of the promised land, they are not cut off. It's interesting, because the Lord has told us if anybody commits a high-handed sin, he will be utterly cut off. And yet here twice we see the Lord showing his mercy to those people. Luis? Now, that's a good question. This is not the last that we hear of Korah in the book of Numbers. Number 16 leaves us with the impression that all of Korah's household has died. And so if we just left it at Numbers 16, that would be the conclusion that we'd have to take away from it. That yeah, he has been utterly cut off. But we get a nice little surprise later in the story. We're basically going to give out spoilers today. Go to Numbers chapter 26. This is something I had never noticed before until I was studying for this class. And this kind of set me back on my heels whenever I first read it. We are getting, in Numbers chapter 26, we're getting a second census, the census of the new generation. That first census was of the lost generation. And in verse 5, we read the census of the tribe of Reuben. All right, and remember, all of Korah's cronies are from the tribe of Reuben. Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, the sons of Reuben. Of Hanoch, the clan of the Hanochites. Of Palu, the clan of the Paluites. Of Hezron, the clan of the Hezronites. Of Carmi, the clan of the Carmites. These are the clans of the Reubenites, and those listed were 43,730. And the sons of Palu, Eliab. The sons of Eliab, Nemuel, Dathan, and Abiram. All right, those are names that we've heard before. These are the Dathan and Abiram chosen from the congregation who contended against Moses and Aaron in the company of Korah when they contended against the Lord. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up together with Korah when that company died, when the fire devoured 250 men, and they became a warning. But the sons of Korah did not die. That's just that's an awfully important little statement to just kind of throw in offhandedly in somebody else's genealogy. Because remember, Korah is not a Reubenite. Korah is a Levite. You would expect this attached to the like a genealogy of Levi.
I thought his whole family, all the children, how
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that in Numbers 16, again, we're given the impression that they all die. In Numbers 26, we're told they didn't all die. Now, just exactly how many of them were left, we don't know. But the text does tell us that there are at least some left. And we know that this is the same Korah, because this is not the last that we read of Korah in the Hebrew Scriptures. Let's see. Let's go to 1 Chronicles chapter 6. Now, the Chronicles start with a long set of genealogies. All right, if you thought that the genealogy of Genesis 5 or the census that we've read in Numbers, if you thought that was long, you ain't seen nothing yet. We're talking like 9 or 10 chapters of genealogy at the beginning of 1 Chronicles. 1 Chronicles chapter 6 gives us the sons of Levi. And where do we want to go down to? Let's go to the sons of Kohat. Remember, Korah is of the clan of the Kohathites. So go to verse 22. 1 Chronicles 6:22. The sons of Kohat: Aminadab his son, Korah his son, Asir his son, Elkanah his son, Abiasaph his son, Asir his son, Tahat his son, Uriel his son, Uzziah his son, and Shaul his son. The sons of Elkanah. Actually, I don't know if we need to read that far. Yeah, we've already seen Korah and his sons presented. Asir, his son, Elkanah, Abiasaph, Asir, Tabat, Uriel. We have got several generations of Korah presented for us here in 1 Chronicles chapter 6. Let's see. I wanted to say there was another place where they're mentioned in this chapter. Yeah, here we go. He's mentioned again a little later in the chapter. And we get an interesting detail about Korah, or rather his descendants, the ones that are left. Starting in 1 Chronicles 6, verse 31. These are the men whom David put in charge of the service of song in the house of the Lord after the ark rested there. They ministered with song before the tabernacle of the tent of meeting until Solomon built the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, and they performed their service according to their order. These are the men who served, and their sons. Of the sons of the Kohathites, Heman the singer, son of Joel, son of Samuel, son of Elkanah, son of Jeroam, son of Eliel, son of Toa, son of Zuph, son of Elkanah, son of Mahat, son of Amasai, son of Elkanah, son of Joel, son of Azariah, son of Zephaniah, son of Tahat, son of Asir, son of Abiasaph, son of Korah, son of Izhar, son of Kohat, son of Levi, son of Israel. All right, and this genealogy especially makes it this is that Korah. Korah is the son of Izhar, son of Kohat, son of Levi, son of Israel. That's the genealogy that's recorded for us at the beginning of Numbers 16. All right, that's his clan. He's part of the clan of Kohat, and he is the son of Izhar. And we're told, so we're presented with, so you've got Abiasaph, Asir, Tahat, Zephaniah, Azariah, Joel, Elkanah, Amasai, Mahat, another Elkanah, Zuph, Toah, Eliel, Joram, Elkanah, Samuel, Joel, Heman. 18 generations after Korah is this guy Heman. And what is Heman's job? He's one of the singers. In fact, we read elsewhere, I want to say it's in 1 Chronicles chapter 9, we read elsewhere that Heman was a contemporary of Asaph. Does the name Asaph ring any bells for anybody? As you read through the Psalms, you see Asaph all over the place. You know, a song of Asaph. A lot of the Psalms are attributed to Asaph, and Heman was a contemporary of his. Beyond that, all right, go to Psalm 42. We're going to check out some superscriptions over some of the Psalms. Psalm 42. To the choir master, a maskil of the sons of Korah. Psalm 44. To the choir master, a maskil of the sons of Korah. 45. To the choir master, according to lilies, a maskil of the sons of Korah, a love song. 46. To the choir master, of the sons of Korah, according to Alamot, a song. 47. To the choir master, a psalm of the sons of Korah. 48. A song, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Likewise, 49, to the choir master, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Not only is Korah not completely cut off, but his sons go on to become faithful servants in the tabernacle and ultimately into the temple, like Korah should have been. All right, real quick one, because we already had the second bell.
Numbers 4.
Uh-huh.
Should this have something to do with this promise that the Lord makes to Moses? It says, the Lord spoke to Moses there, saying, let not the tribe of clans of the Kohathites be destroyed from among the Levites. They have to remain no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, Korah's family is only one family out of the clan of the Kohathites. Yeah. Yeah, I think there is some mercy shown there to the clan of Kohat, but it is also, it's of a piece with the mercy that the Lord has been showing in the book of Numbers. It is, again, whenever I sat down to study this, that was not the story I was expecting to find, and yet, there you have it. So, now, it doesn't do Korah a whole lot of good, but it is a story of the Lord's mercy nonetheless. Thank you so much for your kind attention this morning and your questions and comments.